Hi, I'm Alan Parks and this is A Cup of Tea with Alan. On this podcast I aim to get to know the real person behind your favourite book. So put the kettle on, sit back and enjoy A Cup of Tea with Alan. Hello and welcome to the second ever episode of A Cup of Tea with Alan. I just wanted to quickly come on before we get into the interview with Tony James Slater, just to say thank you to everyone that listened and downloaded the podcast last week. I really appreciate that. And to anyone that's got a favourite author or someone that they'd really like to hear on the podcast, if you're in touch with those people, please feel free to reach out, let them know about the podcast. And if you can email me at acupofteawithalan@gmail.com, we can try and set something up so we can get those authors that you really enjoy to come on the podcast and have a conversation. Thanks again for the support. I really appreciate it. And now enjoy the interview with Tony James Slater. Welcome to episode 2 of A Cup of Tea with Alan. Today's guest is Tony James Slater. He's going to be talking to us from Australia, and he has written a series of travel adventure memoirs, and now he's writing science fiction books, and I believe he's making a living from his writing. So welcome to A Cup of Tea with Alan, Tony.
Cheers, Alan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Again, my second interview, and it's taken me like a week to actually get hold of you because different things have been happening to us. So, yeah, it's really good to have you here.
It's a long distance. I mean, that's the thing. At least you don't have to send letters. I mean, it could be worse.
Well, again, like with you being in Australia, I think we're in evening time there. It's probably your best time of day. I've got this feeling that evening and night time is your best time of day.
I don't know where you got that idea. Maybe it's when I'm posting on Facebook that I just got up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, maybe it's that. Maybe it's like sort of late onset teenage years kind of thing.
It's the dream lifestyle. I'm living the dream, Can stay up as late as I want. No one telling me to go to bed. And the consequence of that is that I work till 6 or sometimes 7 o'clock in the morning. And and then I'm just useless for the entire rest of the day. So I'm basically becoming nocturnal.
That sounds great to me, to be honest. Okay, so I'm going to fire off some icebreaker questions to you. Just quick one-word answers, whatever comes into your head. And then we'll have a little chat about your background and your books and that kind of thing, okay?
Awesome.
Okay, first up, tea or coffee?
Coffee, unless I'm in England, in which case tea.
Is that because you can't get good tea in Australia?
No, it's because my dad drinks 20 to 30 cups of tea a day. And whenever I'm in England, I'm staying with him. And if I wanted a coffee, I'd have to wait for a gap between the teas to ask for one. And you can't, because you go to put down an empty cup and there's a full one waiting already, guaranteed. It's never, ever not a period when there's at least one, if not two, brews sitting there waiting to be drunk. And no chance for a coffee. There's just no stomach capacity. That's
amazing. And a mug or a cup?
Oh, a mug. Yeah, I actually went to a coffee place here recently, and it was an all you can drink coffee type scenario with a buffet. And I poured a cup of coffee, and it was barely a fingernail deep, and I had a queued up for the machine, and I whirred away, and then I drank this thing on the way back to the table, and got back with an empty cup, and was like, bugger. So yeah, what's the point of drinking a cup? If you want a coffee, you want to drink a mug.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Read a book or Netflix?
Oh, look, 100%. I'm a mad reader. That's the only bad thing about my life these days. I'm so busy. I hardly get to read. I still squeeze it in occasionally. But yeah, Netflix is good and everything, but it's so passive. You can sort of do that after when your brain is totally fried. You just want to sort of drool on the sofa. That's Netflix. But any other moment, yeah, I'd read all the time.
Okay, beachside or mountainside?
Oh, that's a tough one. Mountain, because I love snowboarding. So you can't do an awful lot of snowboarding at the beach, it must be said.
Do you surf?
No, I don't. No, and if I was a surfer, then that would probably change that equation a little bit. But the thing about surfers, which I am not, is that they're dedicated. They get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and they get in freezing cold water to do that. And that is love of sport. That really is. I get up and go snowboarding in my own time, and normally with a hip flask of rum and coke or something like that. It's about as far away from the insane dedication of these mad surfers.
Plus, cool. Cats or dogs?
Oh, wow. Tricky questions. See, I've had dogs. I've had both, and I've had dogs all my life. But I'm turning towards cats in my old age. Perhaps just because there's a lot more work associated with the dog. You're constantly walking them and all that sort of stuff. I feel like the trade-off from a cat is you get like a relatively similar amount of affection for a lot less work. They're kind of hands-off. It's a lazy person's pet, which suits me perfectly.
Cold or hot weather?
Cold weather, definitely.
Really? But you live in Australia?
No, that's why I'm saying it. Man, I tell you what, it was 43 degrees last week, in the middle of last week, which is about 109 Fahrenheit, and the road was melting. Like, the road was melting, and no word of a lie there. I was afraid that the car tires were going to explode, which they have done in the past. And I was thinking, who lives in this kind of place? What the hell is wrong with people that live here? There are not enough like temperate zones. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, so I find that it's a lot easier to get warm if you're cold, whereas if you're too hot, getting cold again is just really hard. Got to work at it.
Yeah, I mean, that's very similar to the place I live in, Spain. Obviously, it gets up to 43, 45 degrees in the summer, but right now it's freezing cold. So I'm like thinking, I'm craving some warmth.
No, never happened for me. I love the cold, and as I say, snowboarder. So if I could, I would. I think I would live in Austria. Actually, would be one of my dream countries. It would be just about perfect there.
That sounds like a future book to me. Okay, posh restaurant or McDonald's?
Yeah, McDonald's. I had my first date with my wife in McDonald's, and I'm not proud to say, probably most of the dates ever since.
Vegan or carnivore?
This is a total no-brainer for me. I would definitely be a carnivore. In fact, I have no problem at all with eating a vegan. I consider them lower down the food chain than me. So, zombie apocalypse, any vegans out there, they better run faster than me, because I would eat them in a heartbeat.
And last one, I know the answer to this because we just talked about it, but go to bed early or stay up all night?
All night. I was always a mad party animal, but that's when my creativity strikes. Drives the missus wild, unfortunately, because she's a relatively sensible girl, and about midnight she's saying, "God, it's a late night again, I better go to bed." And then I go and put her to bed, and I sit there and I just start talking about what I'm going to do and what's going on the day. And about half an hour later, she's like, "Can you please just shut up and go?" Because I've obviously just kicked into high gear and suddenly woke up, and at midnight I'm like, "Boom, give me something to do." And she's just like, "Get out."
I can kind of understand it. I wouldn't call myself a night owl. I like going to bed early, but if I'm doing something work-wise, like, for example, editing these podcasts or when I've released my books and stuff, I tend to do that late at night because I'm on my own, it's quiet, and I can get on with it.
That's it, less distractions. I mean, it's not like I have a huge amount of distractions, but me and my wife, Rue, both at home, working from home all the time. So in the day, every 5 minutes, one or the other of us needs the other for something. I'm going over there to get something from her, or she needs my help opening a jar or holding something while she cuts it or something. And it's great, but it's very, very distracting. And for like the writing process, I need a long time to get into, I'll stare at a blank page for an hour and a half, you know what I mean, before I'll type a word, or type 3 words and then delete them and type them again. And 25 minutes later, I still haven't got those 3 words. So I really need that sort of peace and quiet, and I can just sort of finally get into the zone. And then, I'll look up and go, crap, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. Where did the time go?
Yeah, I can understand that. So when you first started writing, I believe your first book was like one of your first adventures when you started traveling. How did you decide to get into writing? I assume the writing came much later on. You'd had the adventures and then you thought, I need to write this down.
Yeah, it was a weird one. As I say, I've always been a reader, and I always loved the idea of, being able to write a book, but never thought I would have it in me. Just sort of the creativity, the coming up with the ideas and stuff. And it wasn't until towards the very end of my stay in Ecuador. I was there for 3 months working in this exotic animal refuge, and it was just ridiculous. Like the stuff that happened, I was like, this is insane. And I was keeping a journal, which weirdly enough got stolen out of my bag. Like anybody wants a half-written journal, but I was just on the tram and someone pickpocketed my journal. Like, hello. I mean, admittedly, there was nothing worth more than the journal in there. It's not like I had, car keys or a flipping phone or anything, but it was just the weirdest thing to take. Anyway, so I lost that. I was a bit gutted, but I'd sent my sister a letter. And she was in America doing Camp America, and I sent her this letter. And halfway through writing it, I wrote it over several nights, just going, "Oh, and today this happened, and you won't believe what happened this day." And I got mauled by a crocodile in that time, and I bled all over the letter trying to write it. I was like, "Oh, you won't believe what just happened." I was like, "Oh shit!" Actually, dropped the blood all over. So I sent it her anyway, and she kept it because she thought it was hilarious, and she was showing it around all her friends in the Camp America stuff. And when she gave it me back after I'd returned from Ecuador, I looked at it. I was like, "Oh, I thought I'd lost all this," and it just brought it back to life. Reading about it, I thought, "Do you know what? This is it. This is the thing. These stories are too weird." They say that truth is stranger than fiction. I was like, this is the absolute example of that. I can't just let this disappear into my memory and be some old guy at a bar who waffles on about the one time I was there and there was this big crocodile, and this needs to go out there. I need to tell these stories to the world. And so I just sat down and started writing them.
I've seen the photograph, and big crocodile might be a stretch.
It wasn't quite the size of a cricket bat. It was extremely small as crocodiles go. But I imagine that the stories would have grown and grown and grown, I guess, and that's why the immortalizing them in book form is so great, because I had loads of people email me and stuff, and they say, I had a book group actually talked to me the other week, and they said, yes, all our members, they wanted to say, how much exaggeration? Come on, like seriously, you can level with us. We read the books, we loved it. How much of it was bollocks? You know what I mean? Or a little bit of a. And I was like, just nothing, absolutely nothing. The only bits that were not absolute gospel truth in the books was the dialogue, because of course I can't remember verbatim every conversation, and I am guilty of perhaps tweaking some of the things that I put words in people's mouths to make them a little bit wittier here or there, or to make them provide a good counterpoint to a joke or a situation. But literally, apart from that, which I've got to say, nobody can remember years ago. It took me 6 years to write the book, so by the end of it, there's no chance I could remember verbatim what conversations happened. But yeah, apart from that, it was all true. And so I have the beauty now that I can't exaggerate it, like you say.
And you don't need to, really, do you? But so what made you go to Ecuador? Ecuador's quite a strange place for a young guy to just take off and travel to.
Yeah, it was a combination of factors, really. One is that I'm really, really lazy, and I really loved animals and wanted to be like a zookeeper type guy, but then realized that involved dedicating your entire life and doing an awful lot of hard work and study. Or I could just half-ass it by going and paying to volunteer somewhere and do all the same sort of stuff in a place with far less stringent safety precautions and things. And so there's that. So it was sort of a laziness and the juxtaposition, really, of laziness with a philosophy of chicks dig guys who work with animals. So that was the whole thing right there.
The kind of Indiana Jones type person did you have in your mind? Was it going to be a bit like that?
If I could literally be anyone, it would be Indiana Jones. I was like, that's it. And I had a book of voluntary schemes, and I just literally flipped through it, finding the ones that were cheap and had the most exciting sounding premise. And this one was just amazing, and it turned out to be exactly what it said on the tin.
I think I might have bought a book like that. I had a plan that I was going to go travelling around the world when I was younger. I was working, I was earning before I met my missus, and there was it was like I found it in the back of the big issue. There was one of these adverts, and you could write off, and it was how to work your way around the world sort of thing.
Yeah,
and, it was probably something very similar to that, I imagine.
Yeah, I collected loads of those kind of things, which is funny because these days every bugger's written one of them. You could probably go on Amazon and find an entire subcategory of work your way around the world books. But in those days, with Dead Tree books and everything like that, there weren't actually that many. And so I bought one which was called Work Your Way Around the World, and I was like, oh my god, there's actually a book called that. That's like someone speaking directly to my mind. What is this? So I had to get that. for about flipping 20 quid or something like that. And then I found it was a mail away thing that on a very early website, it must have been, I think, back in those days. This was talking 2002, I think. I sent that off for a volunteering book, and there was one called Green Volunteers, which is environmental volunteering, and one which was called World Volunteers, which was people, humanitarian volunteering, so sort of war zones and teaching English in Ghana and sort of, poverty-stricken areas and sort of building housing and all that sort of stuff. But for me, that was perhaps a bit too hardcore for my first. I thought if I go out there now, I'm just so depressed the entire time and it's miserable and I'm living amongst that, it was just going to put me off. And I thought, animals, what can possibly go wrong with that? So that's why I went to Ecuador.
Well, on that subject of what could possibly go wrong, there must be a particular story that sticks out, possibly from that first adventure, that you sort of tell everyone about. What would be that story?
Wow, now there were a couple of good ones from that actual one. One of my favourites. There's of course there's the crocodile bitey thing, which sort of again is a great one for blowing out of all proportion. But I think actually one of my favourites. We had a bear cub called Osita, which is, as you know, means little cute bear basically, and she's about sort of 6 or 8 months old. Anyway, she was the size of like the biggest size of dog, like a Doberman size, like scale, but bear shaped, so hugely fat and heavy. So probably weighed 5 times what the biggest dog is, and she loved attacking us in a friendly way. You know how a dog will play, and you see on Tiger King or something, the tigers play by batting you around with their claws, and she was sort of like that. So her idea of play was basically to sort of charge at us and just smash us like bowling pins out of the way. She thought it was hilarious, especially if you could get us from behind, and we're in this enormous enclosure, and we had to go in there to sort of do loads of myriad tasks, feeding her and building housing for her and collecting up the remains of her food and just sort of general cleaning and things like that. And she would sort of always be sneaking around behind. So you always had one person on bear watch, sort of standing there as a lookout with their head on a swivel, whilst the other 2 or 3 volunteers had to do whatever it was they had to do. But when she actually escaped by climbing the electric fence and disappearing off into the landscape, it was a major drama. We were like, if she gets out of the sort of immediate vicinity, this is just land for miles and miles and it's unfenced. Once she strays onto the neighbour's farm, she'll just get shot, because I mean, they don't mess around there. Everybody's got shotguns, everybody's got they're armed to the teeth. So we were desperately trying to get her back, and it's a very long story, but we eventually did get her back. But we couldn't put her back in her enclosure because she'd already got out once. And bears are clever, so she'd just do it exactly the same thing. We could almost see her booting her in through the front door and her running straight to wherever it was that she'd got out, climbing up and being gone again. So we put her in a different little enclosure, and we had to go and figure out what was wrong with the main enclosure. And my boss said, listen, in Spanish, which I only spoke very, very basically at the time, says, listen for the fence. And we listened, and the fence normally had this sort of click, click, click going on. And I couldn't hear. I said, no sound. He says, yes, the electric fence is broken. We must find out if it still conducts current. Touch it. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm not touching it. And he's like, looks at me, goes, be a man. And that's it. Like, you had no choice. Once the Ecuadorian, especially the boss, El Jefe, says to you, be a man, you've got no choice. You can't. There's no coming back from that. So about 10 minutes of looking and sweating and stressing at this electric fence, I grabbed it, and nothing happened. It was broken. I said, it's broken. It's not working. Fantastic. Okay. So my boss said, okay, we must find out where it is broken. Touch the next section.
Oh, no.
Went all the way around the enclosure until I found a bit that threw me back into the bushes with a massive shower of sparks, and got up sort of my hair sticking out and smoking sort of thing. And we realized that the actual wire that conducted the electricity went around these like rubber bungs, and it had slipped off the rubber bung into contact with the main part of the fence and just earthing down the nearest fence post sort of thing. And he goes, all right, we've got to fix it. And he mimed this to me. So sort of grab the 2 bits of the wire and push them together to make the loop bigger, and then pull it back over the bung. And I was like, Are you absolutely kidding me? I'm definitely going to die. Can't we just turn it off first? And he's like, no, it's wired directly into the house mains. I can't just turn it off. So it was a lot of swearing, but I imagine eventually standing on one leg in my welly boot, which he assured me would keep me safe. Well, I didn't die. So.
And yeah, you're still here today. I've got visions of the scene in Jurassic Park where the kid is climbing down the electric fence and they turn it back on.
It's exactly like that. My hair, when I walked back in afterwards, I was sort of walking in kind of this slightly lurching, Frankenstein's monster kind of way, with my hair sticking out, probably slightly smouldering. Everybody was just looking at me like, mate, you look fried. Yeah.
Was there quite a lot of volunteers there aside from you, or was it just a couple of people?
It came and went, really. So I think there must have been a good 20 odd volunteers over the time I was there. But see, I went, and I just went for 3 months because I think there might have been a deal where if you paid for 3 months, you paid for 2 months, you could have a third month free or something like that. And I just went, well, boom, 3 months sounds sensible. Didn't want to go for like 2 weeks and half-ass it and then run home at the earliest opportunity. I wanted to sort of put myself in a position where I had no choice, you know what I mean, but to really get involved. So I just booked it blind for 3 months. And most of the people there came for anywhere between sort of 2 weeks to a month. And yeah, over the course, people came and people went and made friendships and got really, really close to some people. And then they would just, that was it. They would disappear onto the next stage of their adventure, or other voluntary projects or other countries to travel to. And I was still there getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to feed the animals slop out of a bowl of blended fruit and veg. So.
I think if I was there with someone like you, I'd sort of stick very close to you because I'd know you would always jump in and do the terrible stuff before I would have to do it.
I think that's definitely what happened. I was always volunteered for things. People would come in and say, "Oh, Johnny, that's the boss. Johnny's looking for you." I'd be like, "Oh God, why is Johnny looking for me?" Say, "Well, because blah blah blah. There's this bear up a tree, and you love climbing trees." And I was like, "You gotta be shitting me again!" It's like he would literally send for me. I think it became a game at the end. He must have sat around after hours with the rest of the staff going, "Come on, what can we make him do next? This is hilarious. This crazy gringo is so desperate to prove himself. What should we do next? Eat maggots? Nah, that's nothing for him. Climb a tree with a bear in it. Oh, that's a good one. Put that down." It's crazy.
It's amazing. It's amazing to be able to look back, though, on those stories and know that you've done those kind of adventurous things.
That was the other thing about the books, really, as well. It's just the posterity, because like now, my memory, man, I'm 42 now, and my memory's shot. So somebody asks me a specific thing about what happened in Ecuador, but I know because I toiled through writing the books, and every so often have to, read bits out of them or something like that. So it's sort of maintained it. Whereas otherwise, like I did loads of travel, not loads, but bits of traveling before that, and I can't remember any of it. So I think the writing the book process sort of crystallized the adventures and stuff in my brain in that final form as well, with all the sort of witty points and sort of highs and lows and that, and so has sort of maintained them in my head, as well as for future generations. I guess my poor kids get to read about what Dad got up to. Some of it perhaps not so much, but definitely they can read about me getting bitten by a crocodile and think I'm cool, hopefully.
Well, yeah, that's it. And then they'll go to school and they'll tell their friends. It'll be amazing.
Their friends won't believe it as well. They'll be like, "Nah, that's bollocks."
So in all that, you've obviously done quite a lot of traveling, and it's sort of traveling led to more traveling and led to more traveling. If you could sort of think back, have you got a favourite place you've ever visited?
It sort of falls into lots of different categories, really, because every place is good for something different. Like South America in general is just the potential for adventure there is just phenomenal. There's so much less sort of regulation and like health and safety standards. There's so much that's sort of, for want of a better word, undiscovered by El white gringo tourist sort of thing. You can still get a bit lost there. So on my list, I've never been, but on my list are countries like Peru and Bolivia. I'd just love to go and just disappear into the jungle, just with my patchy Spanish and a local guide or two, and just sort of romp around and literally play Indiana Jones in my head. I'd have the soundtrack on repeat on my iPod or something, and be like, "Here I am with my machete in the jungle. We're going to stumble on some Incan ruin," or something. But so there's that. But then I think for sort of just livability, New Zealand is a phenomenally beautiful country. The people are incredible, and it's just so easy to spend time in. So I think, New Zealand is probably my favourite country in the world, and I would almost be living there. My sister actually ended up living there because we both love the place. But in the end, I married an Australian, so there didn't seem much point being an English guy married to an Aussie and living in New Zealand. It just makes everything that much harder, you know.
New Zealand's on my bucket list. I'd love to be able to visit there.
You've got to go. It's got to go. It's amazing.
And talking about your wife, you met Rue while you were travelling, didn't you?
I did, yeah. It's bizarre because I came back from my very first stint of travelling, and it was nuts. And I was like, that was amazing. It was horrible and great at the same time, in that I was sort of travelling around with an ex-girlfriend, and we just fought like cat and dog all the way around. And I came back thinking, my God, that was simultaneously the worst experience of my life and the most incredible thing I've ever done. I was like, imagine what this would be like if with me, I could just travel on my own. Amazing. So I was so enamored of that. I did a little bit more traveling, and then I was, telling my sister, you've got to do this. And she was a bit more shy and retiring. So I applied for Camp America on her behalf, and then told her when she'd been sort of accepted for an interview. She was a little bit perturbed, but, big brother knows best. So I took her to an interview and got her through her interview, and basically forced her, browbeat her to doing Camp America. So she went off to that roughly the same time as I went to Ecuador. And she is very gregarious, bless her. So she made some really good friends in Camp America. And one of them was an Aussie girl called Krista. And they all had to adopt names, aliases there, which for legal reasons, for protection, so that no kid could say, it was Krista that did this to me. They had all these sort of cover your ass kind of things, which was hilarious. So my sister became Splat, and Krista, her best friend, became Rue, because she was the only Aussie at the camp, and they had a great time together. And afterwards, they travelled together all around Europe and around the UK. And Rue invited my sister back to Australia for a return visit. And my sister invited me along because I was living in Thailand at the time anyway, sort of halfway there. And she came to stay with me in Thailand. Said, come to Australia. And I very reluctantly went because I was having a lot of fun in Thailand. And only really went because I was absolutely flat broke and literally could not afford to live in Thailand for like one day longer. So I got to Australia thinking I would find a job, and ended up finding the rest of my life.
Wow, that's amazing. And before we start sort of moving on to the science fiction side of things and the writing side a little bit more, there's one more thing I want to talk about from your first books that I read, and that is the appearing on the TV show with Sarah Beanie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was the craziest of experiences. Now, it's brilliant now because I have this fantastic insight into reality TV. So reality TV is almost as fake as fiction. It's really, really not reality TV. It's a big misnomer. And so it's fascinating to sort of watch, and you sort of see people get all excited about a certain show and what people are up to on it and stuff. And I know that's been staged, and then they've sort of said, no, that argument, that you didn't sell it enough, let's do it again. And so reset to first positions and have that argument again, that sort of thing. So whenever you're watching a show, sort of perhaps not a Big Brother, but one of the sort of these sort of the renovation shows and the real life of Beverly Hills Housewives or any of that sort of stuff, it's just totally fabricated. And obviously the same was sort of true of the Sarah Beanie thing. They filmed everything in chronological order and then took it away and spent the next little while chopping it into a story. Sort of like if you gave someone a random sentence generator and a bag full of like Scrabble tiles or whatever, and then they assembled that into a pleasing word or a pleasing story. So they literally couldn't. And it's funny because when I sit watching it with somebody else, occasionally I'm forced to sit through it again. I find it hilarious now, but it's a deeply traumatic experience for my parents, bless them. But I can sit there and I go, now watch this coming up here. And Sarah Beanie will ask us a question. Oh yeah, we'll reply. And then she'll respond to something else, and then it'll go back to us. And we're wearing different clothes. And you're like, look, see? And nobody notices that. But like those interviews are 3 months apart. I've got a beard, but nobody really notices that. And it's so they basically can create whatever story they want. So if they wanted to create a story that we were, international terrorists planning a conspiracy, I'm pretty sure they could have found the right little clips and chopped it together. So. beware. That's the thing. If you're ever thinking about going on one like that, it can be great fun, but just beware that they will tell the story that they want to tell, which is not necessarily bearing any resemblance to the story that you think is being told.
Well, funny you say that. We were actually on New Lives in the Wild, which is on Channel 5 with Ben Fogle. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
No, I never did. No, we don't get that over here, but I should definitely have a look.
So we were on that program, and we had a very similar experience. It was like the producer and the director came out a few days before, and they were like, we were sitting around chatting, and they came to see the house, and they were scoping out locations and stuff, because obviously you were doing a renovation, but ours was about our lives, so it's a bit different. And they were like, well, we've got this script. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, there's a script. They were like, well, we think this is where we'll start, and this is what we want to say in the middle, and this is how we want it to end. It was like, how bizarre is that?
I know. I sat with the group. They treated us to a meal at one point, our production team. And afterwards, everyone, my family went home, and I was like, oh, I'll just stay for a bit. And they're like, oh, do you mind if we move on to business? I was like, yeah, work away, sitting there with a pint. And so, story meeting, everybody, where are we at with the story? And I remember thinking, what do you mean, where are we at with the story? You're making a documentary, you're filming what happens as it happens. What do you mean story? And I just put it out of my mind at that time, but it's only afterwards that you sort of notice it. And I could always imagine sort of you with the alpacas, and they'd be like, okay, let's show you shearing an alpaca. And you're like, it's not the season. No, but we need that on the show. Tell you what, we'll go to this place where they do alpaca shaving, and we'll get those guys, and we'll do an experience. But what? That's not. And then, let's film. It must be terrible when they escape. Set that alpaca free and chase after it. And you're like, what? Just like that. They sort of want to show what they think should happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And what they want to see. To a degree, is fair enough, because if you could have had 3 alpacas escape yesterday, and they'll show up and they'll all be good as gold, and you're like, oh, God's sake, if you'd have been here yesterday. So they try and recreate that. But it is definitely an almost fraudulent thing when you watch it back, and you just feel, you're just like, oh, that never happened. Oh, I didn't say that. Oh, he took that out of context. It's just horrible. But anyway.
More for me, I think the thing that sort of sticks out in my mind, or like I think about now, because it was a few years ago now for us as well. We've just been watching Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor doing one of their motorbike rides. And
yes.
At one point they were on a boat, and there was a point where they sort of walked up to the edge of the boat and they looked out over the sea, and I just thought, that's so set up. I can just see them saying, oh, no, we need to do that again. You didn't walk quick enough, or you didn't walk. Yeah, it's so weird.
You'll see things like, because I was trying to be an actor at one point, so I did a lot of video production and things like that. You'll see what we're totally immune to, because it's just built into TV, is changing in camera angles. So you'll see 2 people talking, then you'll see a slightly long shot, then it'll flip back to them talking. And fair enough, that's editing. But that requires the moving of the camera and the repeating of the scene. So, like, for example, there's a boat, and they're talking on the boat, and then you see the boat from the shore, pull up to the jetty and then get off. And that means the boat's pulled up to the jetty, got off, let the cameraman and crew off. They've gone off and set up. Then the boat's gone back out to see a bit. Then it's come in and docked again. And you're like, that level of fooling around is what sort of takes it away from being real. You know what I mean? So anyway.
Totally. But it like really stands out. Once you've done it once, you really sort of notice it, don't you?
You see it on every show.
Yeah. Okay, so you've started writing science fiction in the last few years. I'm aware of that. I haven't read any, I'm sad to say, although I have got a couple downloaded on my Kindle. Did you make a sudden decision that this is it, writing's going to be my full-time career, if you like, and then go into deciding what you were going to write? Or
yeah, I did. Okay. I absolutely did. So because I've been amazingly, I've been so lucky, to be honest. I'm incredibly lucky. I wrote sort of my first book, and it came out and whatever, and then I sort of managed to get a bit of traction. And basically since that point, which was about sort of mid 2012, I've been living on my book earnings. Now, living as a backpacker, bearing in mind, so I don't have any large expenses, and even now, me and the wife, we rent in a little house. We've got one car between us, which is a 2005 car. So we don't drive expensive cars, have one each, go to the hair salon. You know what I mean? We sort of still live frugally, but we managed to live. Both of us, because we were already together by the time I published my first book. But we lived on that and supplementary jobs. A joke that I've never had a real job in my life. We've sort of floated from little jobs, doing a bit of part-time cleaning and part-time work on the roads. And at one point she had a job counting people as they got on trains for a little while, just also the randomest of silly little stuff, but never a proper career. And always the majority of the money coming in has been from the books. And it got to the point where I'd published my last one and I'd run out of material. And I was like, what are we going to do now? I can't really keep churning out memoirs about us walking to the shop and stopping off for a coffee. We've got to do something. But going and traveling is massively expensive, and it takes a huge sort of toll. And it's really good fun, but you can't do, from me anyway, I can't do much else at the same time. So I don't get much sort of writing done. Obviously, we're not doing part-time jobs as well. So what inevitably happens is the money slowly goes down from the book income. And that happened. We did a couple of big trips away, and not anything so exciting that I wanted to write about it. I just wasn't really feeling that vibe, and the money was sort of slowly going down. I thought, well, if I write fiction, I can at least pump out a few more books. I had thought about it for a bit, and basically Rue said, I said, look, to my wife, I'm thinking of just jacking this in for now, writing some fiction until we have another adventure that's worthy of turning into a book. Because I don't want to shortchange my readers by putting out something that's rubbish, that's basically me blatantly a cash grab, trying to make something out of nothing and turn relatively humdrum life into crazy adventures. And people, they'll just see right through that. They'll be like, wow, this guy totally sold out, like RIP his career, and move on. So I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be that guy. So I said to her, look, what do you think about me starting writing some fiction? And we're both science fiction obsessives. That's what we read 90% of the time. And she said, if we're thinking of writing some sci-fi. And I said, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. She said, oh, okay, well, on one condition, you've got to write about a kick-ass ninja chick in the future with rainbow hair. And I was like, I can do that. Okay. And that was the first genesis of it. So I started off with that idea. But that's because Rue basically has rainbow hair. And that's her ultimate dream would be to be a kick-ass rainbow-haired future sci-fi warrior in the future with a pair of swords. So she said, write about this character and I'll let you off. So I did, and that was the genesis of it. And I have to say that there's one real advantage to writing fiction, which is you can just make stuff up. You don't have to live through it at great length and then try and pick out the highlights and write about it in such a way to make it funny or anything like that. You can literally just make it up. If you've got a boring chapter, car chase, blow something up, shoot someone, boom, it's brilliant. It's fantastic. And so I've managed to churn out 8, nearly 9 sci-fi books in the last 2 years. So whereas previously the travel books take me at least 1, sometimes 1.5 years to write.
So you literally started, so the first thing was the character before you start. Yeah. You didn't have any story or anything like that?
Nope, I just, it's funny, I've actually got loads of other stories which I always planned on writing. I used to dream really crazy, exciting, like sort of sci-fi adventures and stuff, and always wrote them down, made notes of them and stuff. And I've still got all those files waiting for the day that I feel like my writing is good enough quality. But just to sort of bash out something as a journeyman, to sort of start and get my skills up, because writing fiction is really, really different skill. I'm a big believer that writing memoir, you still need to draw from the novelist's toolbox, in that you need sort of to think about pacing and highs and lows of emotion and things like that. You can't just literally go, diary, today I got up and blah, blah, blah. You got to cut the boring bits and harp on about the exciting bits, really flesh those out with lurid details. And it's all about sort of the rhythm and the flow of it. But I'm not a very good descriptive writer. I sort of gloss over that in my memoirs. And for this, you've got to describe everything. And of course, writing sci-fi, you've got to invent everything. So, they can't just walk into a bar and pick up a drink. What does the bar look like? What does a bar in the far future look like? Is everyone hovering? Is it zero G? Has everyone got guns? Is it full of aliens? What do they drink out of? Is it glass? Is it metal? Is it a plasma magnetic energy shield the shape of a cup? It's like, wow. So it's this hugely complicated thing. So I thought I'll cut my teeth, just make it up and figure it out before I come on to graduate to these better ideas. And so, yeah, started with the character, and it just grew and blossomed from there.
So how did you go through that process? Do you use post-it notes? Have you got a whiteboard? What is that process for you?
All of it. Mostly I make loads of notes, and whenever I watch a movie or read a book or daydream and stuff, I make lots of notes about stuff, and then I have notes and notes and notes on dozens of different Word documents because I'm really, really disorganized, and it's an absolute crapshoot, to be honest. And I finally, a couple of years ago, I caved and got Scrivener, which is the software that writers use a lot, and that's really, really great because I get all my notes in one place, and I try and find or chase down my pieces of paper from 3 o'clock in the morning when I had a few beers, and I went, oh my God, I should have this in, blah, 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 and find this scroll on the back of a receipt from Kmart or something. So I track all that stuff down, copy into Scrivener, and then I sit there and put them in order, and then I join the dots up. And normally the way, because I've got a mind that's geared for comedy, I normally think of something really, really funny, like would it be funny if this, a crazy futuristic chick with her swords and with all that sort of stuff is still really girly, and every time she has to cut the head off an alien, she complains that she's always get blood and entrails on her beautiful nails and things like that. So I sort of tried to I'll write a little scene about that. Oh my God, this is so funny. She'll be complaining about getting blood on her nails, and then she'll have to cut open this alien and stick her hand inside it to get out the transponder inside it or something. And I can just see the look on everyone else's face after she's going, oh my God, I punched that guy and I broke a nail, and look at all the blood on my hand. And they're like, okay, can you just root around inside this body and try? And so I wrote the scene thinking it'd be just hilarious, and then I had to sort of connect them up. Really, I had to find a scenario whereby that particular circumstance could happen, which is really, really, for want of a better phrase, arse about tit. It's a terrible way of writing. I don't recommend it, but it got me through the first couple of books, and after that I sort of realized I needed to be much more structured. So then I sort of started asking questions like, okay, what does this character want? After what's just happened to them, how would they logically go about achieve it? And this is the key: what is the worst possible thing that could happen to them at that moment? So, what does the character want? Food. How would they logically go and get it? They'd walk into McDonald's. What's the worst thing that could possibly happen at that moment? You could sliding scale. The McDonald's is shut. They break in to get food anyway, get arrested. Up to there's a bunch of people follow them in with machine guns and try and take them down in the middle of McDonald's or something. So, you can, and then you just play with those. You go, oh well, it's far more exciting if they get into a gunfight in McDonald's. It's much more interesting story potential than anything I have. But if instead McDonald's is shut and they have to break in and then they get arrested, and then we've got sort of that maybe that's more interesting. And so you just play out each scenario and daydream. And that's how I get through. And then I plot pretty much the whole thing, and then I start writing it.
So are all the books in one series?
Yeah, they've all got the same characters. So I did one series. I did a 5-book series, which was supposed to be, originally I thought it would be one book, maybe a trilogy. And I just got longer and longer. And finally, it ended up being 5 full books just because I'm got verbal diarrhea. I can't shut up, as you might notice. And so that became 5 books. And then I wanted to write a 6th book. But in order to sort of do that, I also wanted to flesh out the backstory of this rainbow-haired sci-fi chick. And so I decided to write a prequel series showing her origins, because then that's the material that I would have to basically work through anyway in my own head in order to write the next book, which was about her going home. And so I decided to actually write this as a prequel book, which became inevitably a prequel trilogy, which I wrote the fastest I've ever written. The first book in a month, the other books in a month and a half apiece, and now I'm just burnt out, crazy burnt out, whilst trying to write the final book that was supposed to have written 6 months ago.
Okay, so what's the name of the first book of the sci-fi that's the best place for people to start if they want to read that?
If anybody wants to read my sci-fi, they start with a book called Earth Warden, which is the entrance to the series, and there's 5 books there. Then it's followed by a 3-book prequel series, but it helps to read it in that order if you like. And then the Earth Warden series continues with a 6th book, which is theoretically the first book in another series, etc. Oh man, I'm so tired. I don't want to write another 3 books or 5 books. I'd be quite happy to be one and done on this one, to be honest. Get back to some memoirs,
I think the difficulty for you as well, from what I've seen from like interaction over the last few years, you kind of do everything yourself as well, don't you?
Well, I do to a degree, and I used to very much so. But recently, my wife, because we do everything together, so we were working together part time in the roads recently, and we decided that we were making enough money from the books to go full time. Both of us. We're only making one person's full time wage, but we live cheap, as I said. So she's now become my manager, basically. So she takes over all the advertising and all that, which is enormously important in being a writer. The only way we can make ends meet at all is by advertising. And it's almost a full-time job keeping on top of it. Certainly something you need to check every single day for, 1 to 2 hours. So now she does that amongst the other sort of projects that she's got going on. So I can mostly concentrate on the writing, which is, again, that's the only reason I've managed to write these books as fast as I could, because that's all I do at the moment is write, and occasionally pop up on Facebook and put a status up like once a month.
Yeah, so she's taken over basically the Amazon advertising side, is that?
Yeah, Amazon, Facebook, and BookBub. We do all three in various combinations. We're sort of not particularly good at any of them, but Amazon is the easiest and the least scary. So we've sort of gone down that after being stung a few times on Facebook. So yeah, she runs that, and that is it's crazy. You actually can sort of really see the difference in it. Always before I've published a book, and you get a bit of a swell of interest, and then the sales sort of tail off, and sometimes there's a happy plateau for a bit, and then it tails off again. Eventually, sort of a good 6 months later, you might be earning $1 a day from that book if you're lucky. But with the advertising, you can actually grow it from a standing start. So it takes a while, it takes experimentation, and it takes investment, because you can start off, you spend $5 to earn $5 back, and eventually you get to the point where you're spending $50 to earn $100 back, and you get to keep 50 of it. And then obviously follow that curve. But at any point, it could just careen off the rails, and that happened recently. Thought we were doing really well. We were sort of spending about $120, $150 a day on adverts, and doubling our money. And then we realised that in actual fact we were just wasting the money. The adverts weren't doing anything, and we would have been earning that money anyway. So I just pissed away something in the order of $3,000 on adverts that weren't helping at all. But,
it is a difficult learning process, this sort of indie author sort of side of things. Back in 2012, I started late 2012, you were talking about mid 2012, it was easy. You put it up on Amazon, you put it for free, and loads of people downloaded it, and then other people bought your other books. It was just easy.
Yeah, it was. Like anything, I guess, everyone harkens back to the golden glory days and stuff, but it moves really, really quickly. And I will say that whilst that was easy, the potential is much more, because very occasionally back then there would be a book that would break out, seriously break out. I'm talking Hugh Howey's Wool, things like that, where the author became a millionaire, not overnight, but after one book. I shouldn't actually say that. Hugh Howey will bust my balls for that. He actually had written loads of books. He'd written a whole 5-book series before he even wrote Wool.
I doubt he'll listen to this.
Yeah. You never know. His spies will tell him. You could do quite well without advertising back then, which is fair enough. But you also couldn't attain the heights. And I know people that I exchange emails with who are making, 6 figures consistently every year, and people making a lot more than that. The superstars of the industry are making, $500,000 to $1 million a year of profit. And they're not necessarily doing anything different from what I'm doing. They're just better at it. And that doesn't mean that their books are incredibly good. They're sort of these undiscovered gems. It just means they're working harder, and they've become more adept with the adverts. Their ads are better, and
they've scaled it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, if you think of most conventional jobs, you get better and you get paid as you progress and you become more skilled. If you're an expert financial advisor, you command a lot more money. But with authors, you could be writing 50 books, and the 50th book could be so much better than the first one, but there's not necessarily a scaling up of money associated with that unless you do the business side of it. So it's nice that there is a business side of it now, because that has a sort of a more linear progression. It's still got an element of luck and all that sort of stuff, but there is a much more tried and tested and proven way of going from earning small potatoes to actually making a living.
Yeah, and an even playing field, because in the old days it was, you sort of felt sometimes that Amazon had their favourites and stuff like that, but now the new platforms, it's kind of even for everyone.
Yeah, I've always just been all in with Amazon. It's purely that's where the money is. So the whole not looking gift horse in the mouth and stuff. I toyed with other avenues for sales, but I've always just done well enough on Amazon that it's like it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of way. So I am, as we said earlier, pretty lazy.
Okay, so the first memoir is That Bear Ate My Pants, is that right?
That Bear Ate My Pants, yes, because that bear definitely did eat my pants, damn her.
And Earth Warden is the first sci-fi.
That's it, Earth Warden.
If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for people to get in touch?
Easy as. I'm Tony James Slater, and the reason I'm Tony James Slater is because all the Tony Slaters were taken, because there's hundreds of those buggers. So if anybody types in Tony James Slater to Google, all the results are me. So that'll get you my website, my Facebook, my Twitter, not that I'm on there very often. And you can easily drop me a message through my website and look at some ridiculous pictures of crocodiles, very small crocodiles, and jaguars and all sorts of things biting me and attacking me. And yeah, all the contact details are there, and you can find me anywhere just by a simple Google search for Tony James Slater.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really interesting talking to you.
No worries, mate. Sorry I went on for so long. You know me. Can't shut me up.
No, it's perfect. We will catch up again soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers, mate. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of A Cup of Tea with Alan. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe and please consider leaving a review. You can follow my social media on Facebook at A Cup of Tea with Alan, and you can follow me on Instagram by following the handle at A Cup of Tea with Alan. That's all one word. If you're an author who'd like to be featured on the podcast, please do feel free to get in touch, either by direct message on social media, or you can email acupofteawithalan@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it.